Hi, everybody. This is Matthew Poes with Poes Acoustics, and I'm answering questions. So on my industry consensus on mixing sealed imported subwoofers, Milo Burke, who gave $10, said, I experienced 5 demo rooms at CEDIA this year, including the Grimani Systems room. I just want to stop and say Grimani teamed up with JVC, and what he presented was a very basic low-end room. It was done on purpose to try to show what Grimani can do when budgets are tight, but I do not consider that representative of what Grimani Systems is like. That is representative of Grimani on a budget. The SVS room with 2 of their new PB17 Ultra subs, the Perlisten room with 14 D215s. They all blew me away with bass loudness, but everything sounded boomy, not articulate. My Modest system has a pair of Shu 12-inch subs, and they sound more tuneful to my ears, not making all low frequencies sound like a rocket launch. I have 6 large rigid fiberglass absorbers that are 6 inches deep. I used REW to determine sub placement and DSP, but I'm not a pro. All the CEDIA demo rooms were significantly louder than how I watch movies at home. Could my perception of boominess in CEDIA rooms be the product of really high SPL or noise pollution, choice of demo content, insufficient room tuning time, or favoring loud bass for all instead of articulate bass for just a couple seats? Kind of. So I mentioned this before, CEDIA and all the similar venues are a terrible place to really get a full understanding of what systems sound like. So the idea that you could put together a fully functional, high-performance, cost-no-object home theater in 2 or 3 days, and for anybody who actually has done a really high-end, like a $500,000 plus theater, do you design and implement those in 3 days? Of course not. Even if you do 100% of the design work ahead of time, do you install those in 2 or 3 days, get them up and running? Of course not. Typically, from start to finish, those kinds of high-end theaters take 1 to 2 years. And they could be done quicker. I've seen them done, but like a quick version would be 6 to 8 months. Now, the design portion takes 3 to 6 months. There may be more time, depending on how complex it is. It could be more than that, but 3 to 6 months is typical for a kind of average theater. A couple of my really high-end projects, there's probably a good year of design work that goes into them, but there's also a lot more that goes into the design than is normal. So when I say that, I don't want you to think that placing speakers and designing the wall treatments and stuff takes a year. It's not that. There's structural stuff. Like if you're building a riser and instead of having 1 or 2 extra rows of seats behind the main first row, now you've got 6 rows and it's concrete and it needs to be able to support thousands of pounds. You've got isolation, you've got acoustics, you've got structural integrity, you've got, in one of the rooms I'm thinking of, we had HVAC running through it. There's all sorts of things that are complicated and make it more difficult, and there's multiple people that have to be involved. Structural engineering, there's the mechanical engineering group, the M&E, there's us, the acoustical engineers, etc. So you're all working together. So those systems take a really long time. These systems are basically as complicated or more than any of those super high-end jobs, but they're being thrown into a makeshift styrofoam room. I mean, if you saw how the walls of these rooms are made, it is so junky. The Perlisten one was actually Trinnov's room, and the room itself was designed by Officina Acoustica, and that room is a little bit better, but even that isn't really designed the way you would typically design a proper room. The Acoustics are, that's their system, but the wall structure itself is still very lightweight compared to normal rooms, and it's not built with the same degree of isolation. Then there is noise pollution. So it is extremely, I cannot overstate how noisy it is at CEDIA. On that main show floor, this microphone and the Rode version of it overloads just being in the room if I'm around too many people. The noise of everybody talking all around you and all the demos and everything else creates a noise pollution that typically is in the 80 to 90 dB range. That's just the average noise walking around. It's really loud. During quieter parts or some of the quieter areas of that, I've still measured 75 dB. A typical room would be somewhere between 30 and 45, maybe 50 dB. If you just walked into your average quiet room without people talking or with mild conversations, maybe with conversations in the 50s. So to be at 75 to 85 dB and then clipping microphones like that, you got to know that's really, really loud. So that does not help. Now, then there's some other things you mentioned. You said about favoring loud bass for all instead of articulate bass for a couple of seats. So that would not be true, at least of the Perlisten room, because waveforming gives you exactly the same bass in every seat, or close enough, within a dB in every seat. So the bass quality is the same in all those seats. It should be if everything was working right. And they were using waveforming. I think what you're hearing is two things. One is, yes, SPL. They are playing these at a reference level and above. There were a number of rooms where we were measuring and we were finding that the playback levels they were using were in fact louder than reference level. So that's issue number one. Issue number two, there is this CEDIA effect. I think some of it stems from the noise pollution, but I think a bigger piece of it is not noise pollution. It's actually this desire to impress. People are often impressed by those rocket booms. And so, yes, they pick content on purpose that has a lot of explosive bass in it. Add to that the other problem. So in addition to that rocket explosion bass that they have in the content they've chosen, they do turn the subs up, sometimes a lot. So this year at CEDIA, I don't think there was quite as much of a competition going on between the rooms. They kind of set it and left it. I could be wrong. I wasn't as involved in the big rooms this year. But last year, not this year's CEDIA, but the one before, they were actually turning the bass up throughout the show, basically to compete with each other, because people kept saying, oh, well, part of the problem was actually the Trinnov room. So they had ridiculous number of subwoofers provided by Ascendo. They had very, very high output. The bass was definitely elevated in that room. And so as a result of that, the other rooms kept turning their bass up to compete until it got to a point of being pretty absurd. And all of them were too loud, but people liked it. But you, Milo, do not, apparently. And I think that's totally reasonable that you don't. The bass is too loud. So the Perlisten room I thought sounded great. It was actually one of the best sounding demos I've ever heard. But the bass was elevated. There's no getting away from that. And I heard that. Because I know that and because I understand what I'm hearing, I don't negatively judge rooms that have done that because I know that that's a very simple fix. You can turn it down. I actually don't think the bass was boomy. I think what you were hearing was the loudness. So in that particular room, I thought the bass was very clean and tight. I just think that they had tuned it in such a way. The other thing is, and I'd have to measure your room to see, but sometimes people misinterpret tightness when something doesn't exist. And so I've heard people who hear a room that actually has extended bass and they're like, that doesn't sound good. I like my old system better. And then I go back and forth and I take measurements. And what I realize is they're missing an octave or two of bass, which is a lot. And they perceive it as clean and tight because it doesn't exist. So they're not hearing the overhang that naturally happens from bass that's being correctly and naturally produced at those frequencies because their system as is doesn't have it. So in your example, you're saying you have two Shu 12-inch subs. The way you have it set up, it's completely possible that the system isn't, you would maybe know better because you said you used RU to determine sub placement and DSP. Is the system basically flat to 20, 25 hertz? And remember, these systems were flat to below that. So I'd have to look again at Anthony's. I helped him calibrate it, but I don't remember what our data showed. I think I have it on my computer though. But on some of the other systems, I know that they were flat down to like 10 hertz, or 12 hertz or something like that. So when you say that, I mean, is your system flat to 10 hertz or 15 hertz or 20 hertz? If it's not, what you may be experiencing is not boominess in the sense that the systems were badly set up or sound bad, but what it sounds like when you actually allow bass to be reproduced all the way down to those frequencies. The other thing is that I think Shu makes great subwoofers, but the lower end Shu subwoofers don't have a ton of output in the deep bass, and so you may just not have as much output down there. And that may, again, that loudness difference can sound that way because bass does ring way more than mid and high frequencies do. It's a natural part of it because of the long wavelengths. And it just tends to, the reflections around the room and everything cause it to decay slower. That's very normal. And when you've got a significant amount of output at those low frequencies, that tends to be an issue that you run into, is that it can sound a little bit boomier. I guess that's all I can say about it. Those, as I said, I know those rooms all measured pretty good. They could be better, and they definitely turned the bass up too loud, but overall pretty good. And a lot of them were using waveforming or something similar, which would have given them really good consistency across seats. Grimani's did not. That was a really basic system. The fact that you thought the bass was boomy in that room, I would say probably was just room acoustics. We really couldn't put bass traps in there. We had some 2-inch and maybe 4-inch absorbers. That was it. That was all we could get away with. It was a very simple system. It was just, I don't remember how many, 2 or 4 subs, something like that. Basic 13-inch model. And the bass was nice and smooth. We didn't have a lot of peaks and dips, but there was some inconsistency between seats. Not a lot, but enough that it wasn't, to me, it just wasn't a great representation of what I know Grimani can do. Like, I know the Grimani systems, speaker systems, when they're larger, more capable, are like, oh my God, wow. It was really good for what it was, all things considered. But it wasn't as good as I know it can be, and there were things that disappointed me, including, for those who saw that, JVC stuck a person in the corner to give a presentation. They're a video company. They don't care about sound. And I get it, and I understand why they did what they did, but it did mean we had a person standing right next to the left channel, and that was affecting the sound quality. And I kept getting jokes from my friends who were like, I got a great presentation of the Grimani systems. That lady sounded great. And I'm like, I know, nothing we can do. We did our best to address it. We raised the speakers up, but it was not ideal. All right, well, thanks everybody for watching these videos. I hope that these are helpful for you. I hope that you're finding them informative. Let's keep the questions coming. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we have more in the future. Thanks, everybody.